Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about the overall economic challenges posed to Pakistan, especially as we all know that Ramadan is arriving, and there were earlier crises regarding basic commodities and their prices and their availability. So, let's see what the government is going to do about that in the coming weeks. And secondly, we'll also be talking about a couple of other very important facts. As we all know, that dollar against rupee is on a constant low, and around 153 rupees for a dollar is the exchange rate as we speak of today. So I think it has lost a lot of value during the last almost 3 to 4 weeks. Obviously, remittances are coming in. Then we also talk about the IMF package that has been granted to Pakistan. Money is pouring in. You talk about the exports, they are improving. Imports, there is a check on them. And having said that, I think Pakistan is managing quite well during these hard times. But to talk about it, let me give you the brief account of what we'll be talking about in our today's program. So when we talk about the Pakistan's economic challenges, we see that the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf government inherited the biggest current account deficit in Pakistan's history and had converted it into a surplus. When PTI government came to power in 2018, Pakistan's forex reserves were around 8 to 9 billion, most of which were swaps or taken from other countries. This was stated by the finance minister, Hamad Azhar. He further stated that if we add swaps, there has been an increase of 9 billion, of which 6 to 7 billion swaps were cleared. This is a very big achievement. The stabilization we have achieved in our current account reserves, the growth in large-scale manufacturing, we will take these forward in a better way. Again, stated by the finance minister. Further, Pakistani rupee has emerged as the world's best performing currency as it appreciated the most against the US dollar in the past 3 months, ended March 31st, 2021. That means the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year. Now, Cabinet did not approve restoration of trade ties with India. The restoration of trade ties is subject to pre-August 5th, 2019 status of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Federal Minister of Science and Technology, Fawad Chaudhry, stated this. Couple of tweets are there as well, coming from the Finance Minister, Mr. Hamad Azhar Saab, saying that we navigated economic fallout of COVID-19 fairly well. The world is witnessing supply chain disruptions and rise in food prices. We shall endeavor to protect our people from these shocks. With hard work and integrity, we will inshallah build Naya Pakistan under the leadership of the Prime Minister, Imran Khan. Hamad Azhar further stated that Pakistan has very successfully concluded its first ever 3 tranche capital market transaction yesterday with 5, 10 and 30-year Eurobonds at 6%, 7.375% and 8.875%. Leading global investors showed great confidence in our country's economy and future outlook, stated by Mr. Hamad Azhar, the finance minister. So today we'll be talking about these in detail. Where exactly are we heading? How the rupee is going to react with dollar in the coming days? What about our forex reserves? Obviously, we talk about our exports, remittances, and the inflow of money. To talk about this, let me introduce you to our panels. We have with us Abid Qayyum Suleri Saab, member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Suleri Saab will be joining us on Skype. And we have with us Sardar Yasir Khan, the president of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And he's also joining us on Skype. And later we'll be talking to Shaukat Tareen Saab and Saqib Shirani Saab also. Shaukat Tareen Saab has been the former finance minister, and Saqib Shirani is a known leading economist in Pakistan. But let me put the first question to Sardar Yasir Khan Saab. Sardar Saab, first of all, thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World now. A couple of very interesting data that we have received. I mean, let me start off first from the Pakistan's economic challenges. Now, a lot of issues are there. People are talking about inflation. People are talking about some basic commodities. Unfortunately, hoarding is the issue there. But as we all know that Ramzan is approaching, sir, Shaban is almost about to end after perhaps 10 days or so. What do you think could be the real challenges people might face as far as the commodities are concerned in the approaching month of Ramadan? Let's start off from there, sir.
I think, firstly, well, thank you for a number of issues we need to look at. I mean, primarily it's with regards to regulation and also policy. I understand that we're going through a tough time with regards to COVID-19, but we need to stop from letting it get in the way. I mean, if we keep going back towards these lockdowns and not realize this economy is very much dependent on the cash that we have, and we haven't really got a lending program in place from the state bank, nor is there any stimulus in place, nor is there any financial incentive being offered by the government. At the same time, FBR is scrutinizing all tax filers, to pay on the given dates and pay in full. So we've proposed numerous times that we need to have some sort of a relief and offer people a deferred date or offer people installment plans for the taxation. As far as the local markets are concerned, you've seen that currently the government is locking down 2 days across the entire country, and we're trying to negotiate terms that this is not a solution. We feel that you can enforce policies like they have done in the other countries. And UAE is a fine example. I was in the UAE last week, and all the malls are open. They've got a global village which is underway. Thousands of people are visiting there, and they're just following SOPs. So I think in the coming months, in the coming weeks, primarily when we're looking at Ramadan, inflation is already at its highest. We're looking at about 11 to 12% unofficially. Officially, the last number that we received was close to 9-10% back in September. So I'm very much concerned about how we're going to survive the current situation. And the current economic outlook looks bleak considering the COVID-19 scenario. And I think the government needs to realize that we need to act now, act fast, take the Chamber of Commerce on board, ask the Chamber of Commerce what the resolve is. And from our side, we repeated numerous times that the only way to do this is to enhance our own tax net, our tax base, and ensure that we have enough reserves in place, which we do not. We are currently dependent on IMF, for which again we are increasing our tariffs, our utility costs is going up, our fuel prices are going up, and that is not the solution. It's like putting a band-aid on a severe cut, which needs perhaps surgery, or perhaps it needs stitches, but you're just putting a band-aid, which is not going to stop it from a person from bleeding out. So a bleeding economy needs a longer solution, a long-term sustainable outlook. With the sort of economic advice that we can give as Chamber of Commerce across Pakistan. And we feel that the easiest solution is to get the tax net, enhance the tax net, and get more people to pay tax. And the way to do that is to increase their confidence. Currently, there's a huge trust deficit, and we've said numerous times again that the FBR has a very lethargic, tedious process of tax filing. There's a lack of orientation. The volume is generated from the traders, and the traders are not willing to come onto TaxNet, especially when you're going to say that we're going to attach your accounts, and that's just not doable. I'm sorry, but you cannot tell people that these people that are paying tax or people that are willing to pay tax are considered as thieves, which they're not. And I would like to clarify this one more time, that if you do not take the Chamber of Commerce on board and do not increase the tax net, we're never going to be able to decrease our fiscal deficit, and we're going to keep going back to the IMF, which is going to drag this country down. And our economic growth is already negative, and I can see it getting worse if you continue on the same path.
Abid Saleh Saab, first of all, thank you very much, sir, for taking out your time. Since you are the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, so if you look at the last 9 months or the last 3 quarters of the fiscal year, sir, do you believe the kind of approach the government had regarding the setting of the targets and everything, do you think the government was able to achieve those? If we have lost count on some, tell us about that. If we have, for example, surpassed certain targets, as we know that the tax collection has been really fair, and Prime Minister also hailed that and really talked very well of the services of FBR. Let's talk about that. So, Larissa.
Thank you, Faisal. First of all, it's quite difficult to make any linear correlation between any two parameters when it comes to assessing and judging the performance of economy. Now, when I look back at last 9 months of this fiscal year, I have to see government's performance on containing COVID-19. I have to look at all the fiscal stimulus and the relief measures those were provided during COVID-19. I have to see that how flexible government remained in recalibration and in rebasing its different targets due to the impact of COVID-19. So no one was expecting the third wave we were hoping that like first and second wave of COVID, those were comparatively benign and they didn't affect our economy that much. So perhaps COVID would pass through like this, but then the third wave is quite serious and quite dangerous, which will affect the economy and which will affect many of the targets. Similarly, we were looking at the increased orders by export orders by textile sector, but then no one has forecasted that climate change that would affect on our cotton production, and we would be not be able to achieve our cotton yield targets, which is now seriously affect our cotton exports. So it's not a zero-sum game. On certain areas and certain sectors, government has done above average, comparatively well. Uncertain, it hasn't. And there are certain areas which are where still a lot of uncertainty it prevails. When we talk of inflation, and especially food inflation, and all four types of inflation, headline inflation, core inflation, cost push inflation, and demand pull inflation, all four, they are simultaneously affecting Pakistan. So in case of edible oil, in case of petroleum products, in case of pulses, in case of wheat, in case of refined sugar, in case of tea, so all of these things which we are importing, their domestic prices, they are on rise because their international prices during last 4-5 months, they have increased manifold. Similarly, when we talk of this wheat only, again, the minimum support price, the Ramzan factor that your guest was talking about, they would have an impact on the increase in price of wheat flour. So simply by increasing the minimum support price in Punjab and in federal government from 1,400 rupees to 1,800 rupees, which was a must to remain competitive in international market, we have increased the price by 10 rupees per kilo for the wheat, and that would translate into wheat flour as well. So it's a multifaceted, multidimensional challenges that the government is facing, and not only the government of Pakistan. I think most of the developing world is facing with this triple challenge of health, of economic recession, and of food crisis. And when I compare ourselves with the peer economies, I feel that Pakistan is doing much better compared to many other countries, and compared to countries like Brazil, emerging economy, which has much higher GDP per capita than us. But if you look at the losses by COVID there, both losses in terms of human health and human lives, as well as losses in terms of economic recession and food crisis, those are much worse than we are facing. So these are unusual years, 2020 and 2021 for Pakistan and for the rest of the world, and let's see that how we can do our best to come out of these years.
All right. Now, another quick comment from you, Suleri Saab, and that is regarding the reviewing of the IMF program and the State Bank of Pakistan bill. That was hinted by the Finance Minister, Hamad Azhar. Would you like to throw light on that aspect, sir?
Well, I think much of debate that is going on this State Bank Autonomy Bill, it has more heat than substance. We still don't have this official or final draft that would be presented to the Parliament. So most of the media groups and most of the experts who are talking on the bill, they are talking on the draft that they have gone through, but no one knows that what is the shape and substance and contents of the final draft bill. Similarly, the discussion which is going on is, I think, is on a very irrelevant question. The discussion is whether we should give autonomy to State Bank or not. And to me, this is the question that we should ask whether we should send our girl children to school or not. I think it is already a settled matter that international best practices, they tell you that most of the countries and most of the economies in developed as well as in developing world, they have given a sort of autonomy, operational autonomy to their reserve bank, to their state banks. Perhaps the debate and discussion should be that what would be the contour of those economy, that autonomy, and what would be the goals and targets that state bank would be interested to achieve while enjoying those autonomy. So for me, if I look at it from an objective manner, I would start with some sort of target that would be given to the state bank, and target would be containing inflation, and not only core inflation, which exclude energy and food prices, but also headline inflation, where energy and food prices are also included. So first, giving that sort of range, that state bank should not let inflation go beyond that range in any fiscal year, both in terms of core inflation and headline inflation, and then working on their interest rate and working on the exchange rate. Exchange rate is already now linked with the open market demand and supply, and contrary to what many have thought last year, that rupee would lose its value like anything, and by end
But it was the other way around, yeah.
220 per dollar, we can see that it's stable. So it's the fear of unknown that is prevailing when we are talking of state bank autonomy. We still need to see that what will be the final draft in the parliament, what sort of discussion occurs over there, and what would be the obligations on state bank in order to enjoy that autonomy.
All right, all right. Now, coming back to you, Sardar Sahab, couple of points. I mean, since our guest Suresh Sahab was telling us about the dollar-rupee parity. Now, interestingly, so if you look at the last 2, perhaps 3 weeks, rupee has gained significantly. Perhaps the inflow of remittances that has increased. I mean, look at the month of February. I mean, we really had a record inflow of remittances. You talk about the tranche above 500 million coming in from IMF. Then we are talking about floating of the bonds through which we'll be capitalizing around $2.5 billion, so on and so forth. Do you think this trend is going to continue, or at some stage we'll see that, perhaps there's going to be some sort of pressure on rupee?
I think, it's not primarily dependent on the Pakistani government's policies with regards to rupee, because dollar has declined globally. And that's primarily to do with the economic, outlook in the U.S. And I think that's going to have an effect on the global economy as a whole. So we're just the benefactors from that. And I think, as a nation, we should have done much more. When you're looking at the passing on the benefit to the Pakistani community or the citizens, you look at oil prices, for example, and we remember that it had hit a $28 per barrel, the lowest, a couple of years back, and now it's been going up gradually all the way to 50 and then 60 dollars a barrel. So at the time when it was the lowest, if we had funding in place and plans in place, we could have acquired significant number of reserves, which would have benefited the economy, would have benefited the people. And I think that's another setback, that the rupee, despite going all the way up to such a higher the dollar going up and the rupee devaluing against the dollar, we've never really been able to protect ourselves, and that has really passed on a detrimental impact on our economy. So if you look at the sector, which is real estate, for example, real estate is primarily dependent on imports, where we import everything from tiles to machinery to plants to equipment to chillers and everything. So all of that has taken a huge hit. So imagine your cost of construction, which would have taken a hit about 60 to 70 to 80% on a project value. So that's significant. Same thing goes and applies to the vehicles, to everything else, for every other sector that you import. So a lot of the raw ingredients needed for our industry in Pakistan are imported. So we've taken a huge hit. So moving forward, I think there's a lot more that we have to do, and also we need to become more competitive in terms of exports. So if we're going to make sure that Pakistan's economy is in the longer run safeguarded against all foreign impacts, that's primarily to do with ensuring that your exports are up to the mark, which we haven't done in the last 15, 20 years. I'll give you an example. If you look at our GDP per capita,
Sardar Sahab, if you allow me to intervene, sir. The question, because there was a statement by the minister, said the Pakistani rupee has emerged as the world's best performing currency, as it appreciated the most against the US dollar in the past 3 months, and that ended yesterday, the March 31st. Is it the fact that dollar is getting weakened, or rupee is getting appreciated, or perhaps both?
I firmly believe that the dollar is getting weaker, and if you look at the indices worldwide, if you look at NASDAQ, Dow Jones, FTSE, DAX, DFM, if you look at all the markets that are trading, if you look at the pound, for example, and there's economic impacts, economic indicators in those countries which have impacts on those markets. For example, if the UK right now is shut down, locked down, isolated to the rest of the world, that's going to have a huge impact on the pound. And similarly, whatever's happening in the US, with the Federal Reserve, if Joe Biden decides to do something with regards to the Federal Reserve, that's going to have an impact on the dollar. So currently, what's happening with the dollar is becoming weak and overseas globally. The dollar has become weaker, and that's helped Pakistan. So it's just a coincidence. It's not something that we've done in terms of our economic policy that the rupees come out stronger. It has nothing to do with that.
All right. Now, Sardar Saab, we have also been joined in by Saqib Shirani Saab. He's a senior banker, a senior economist. Assalamu alaikum, Saqib Saab.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Saqib Saab, for taking out your time and talking to PTV World. Now, first of all, say if I may put a very layman kind of a question, that when you look at the last 3 quarters of the current fiscal year, despite the fact that COVID is there, this is the third wave, Ramadan is approaching, there are a lot of issues left, right, and center. But as far as the economy is concerned, let's tell us about the indicators and let's tell us about the overall performance. Are you satisfied? Do you think it's going to get better? Or again, this is a pretty fluid situation, sir, as we speak?
So it's Faisal, it's a mixed bag because clearly, some parts of the economy have not just stabilized, like the external account. The external account actually is doing quite well in terms of the foreign exchange reserves accumulation, as you just mentioned, in terms of the appreciation of the rupee. But I think, and of course, some parts of the real economy, as we call it, the construction sector, some allied sectors, they are picking up and they're doing well. But I think the question we need to ask is, and I think this is exactly the discussion you were having just now with your other guest, how much of this is unique to Pakistan? How much of it is a global factor? Secondly, how much of this is caused by government policies, or how much of it is some external factor? So I think we need to be a bit more nuanced in how we approach it. There's some good things. So, for example, when we talk about growth and we talk about the external account stabilization, when we're in an IMF program, midway through it, this is exactly what's happened each time. Reserves have started to build up, foreign investor confidence comes back in, the growth starts picking up. Unfortunately, we've seen in the past that these are not sustainable, right? So we need to look for what is happening that's making the economy sustainable. And I think there, the outlook is a bit not as bright as the current indicators seem.
Okay. So perhaps what needs to be done now, sir?
So there are basically, as you know, 3 different levels of, reforms. One is structural reforms. So, we talk about improving the tax to GDP ratio, for example. And then there's a second set of reforms which are related, and they're institutional reforms. So if you want to increase the tax to GDP ratio in Pakistan without killing the businesses, and that's really important because...
And Shirani Saab, that tax to GDP ratio should be around 14 to 15% more or around that figure, sir?
Well, so it's a function of not the per capita income of a country as much as what the structure of the expenditure side is. So given the structure of our expenditure side, I think ideally we should be around 16 to 17%.
16 to 17, okay.
Yeah. So coming back to your first question, so let me just qualify. For example, one of the things that the government is very happy about is FPR performance. But I'm sure your esteemed guests, the president of ICCI, of Islamabad Chamber, will tell you, and this is what I've heard. Once again, FPR is extracting revenues through unfair assessments and demand notices from businesses. So if this is how they're going to show performance, it's bad for the economy in the long run. So the institutional reform, the first and foremost reform is fix FPR. We've not done that, unfortunately. So there's some big areas the government has missed out on, and some good things that they've done, which have carried us this far.
All right. Another important area, sir, obviously when we talk about the remittances, look at the current flow, it's really increasing. The government believes that this is because of the policies they have introduced. But sir, looking at the kind of remittance increase in India, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in the regional countries, so they had the previous policies as well. But sir, is it because of the kind of, COVID reason, one, and the shrinking of the businesses. A lot of people are coming back to the country. They're closing their accounts, selling off their properties. How do you see that aspect, sir? Because at some stage, remittances will go down, sir.
I think I agree with you. Once again, this is another area where what we are seeing is the tremendous increase in remittances is one, it's not unique to Pakistan, it's happening across the board. That means there are certain factors which are not specific to Pakistan. And one of those, two of those factors you've mentioned, one which is that people have been returning back with their savings from the Gulf countries back to South Asia, and secondly, because of the fact that travel was disrupted, then this whole Hawala Hundi business has been disrupted as well. So people have been forced to send the remittances from informal channels to formal channels. Okay. And I think these are factors that are quite common to Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh as well. So it's a moot point whether this is sustainable or not. It's providing a huge prop to Pakistan's external account. But unfortunately, if it goes away, then we could be in some trouble.
All right. Sagar sir, last comment before we will let you go, sir. And that is about, since you spoke about the FBR collection, you talked about the remittances. So import and export. Now, that's the key. I think the government has done a better job as far as the import was concerned. A lot of checks were there. The rates were increased as well. But sir, coming back to the imports now, it seems that, sir, we are still stuck around that 22 billion mark, sir. Nothing is improving. We are not looking for new virgin markets. We are still stuck with the same old trend. No product diversification either, sir. No value addition. And sir, we've been talking, Shaheen Saab, we have been talking about it for the last so many years, rather decades. Your take on that, sir?
So I think you've hit the nail on the head. So the two things that are really pulling back Pakistan for the last 30 years or 40 years or so, one is, of course, for me, even bigger than tax to GDP ratio, is our exports to GDP ratio. So we tend to think of exports in dollar terms, in absolute numbers. The real important indicator is how much of your economy is oriented towards exports. And that comes from looking at the exports to GDP ratio. And that used to be 13 to 14% about 15 years ago in Pakistan, and India was the same level as us. Today, we've come down from that level to 7%. It's halved. The only major country in Asia where export to GDP ratio has come down. India has moved up to 20%. Bangladesh has moved from 7.7% to 18% of GDP. So clearly, there's something very, very wrong with our policies towards exports.
All right. Shaheen Saab, what a pleasure, sir, to have you, and thank you so much for your comments. Now, we have also been joined in by the former Finance Minister, Shaukat Tareen Saab. Assalamu alaikum ji.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Tareen Saab, what a pleasure to have you in our show, sir. Thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to us. First of all, sir, since you're a man of finance, I mean, you're a banker, you're a person who understands the economy. Looking at the current scenario, sir, where Pakistan is at the moment, looking at the regional conditions, COVID is one problem. We hope and pray that it's over soon. But as long as it is there, the problem is still there. Now, sir, the kind of challenges, the major mega challenges faced by the Pakistan economy. Let's talk about that. Tareen Saab.
Mega challenges which we face we have been facing for the last several decades. We just basically short on revenues. The government doesn't have revenues to meet its expenses, and then we just go into fiscal deficits. Then we try to just ramp up the growth by just borrowing. And when our saving rate is very low, and it does not support more than 3 to 4% growth. And when we just go up to maybe 4.5%, 5%, 5.5%, 6%, then we create a hole for ourselves, and then we just run out of dollars. So what are the major issues? The major issues first are that we have to just grow our revenues, cut back on our expenses, and one of the major expenses is these losses on the state-owned enterprises. So we need to just balance our books. Secondly, we have a major issue that, our industry is not competitive. And why it's not competitive and exports are not competitive, because we basically are family businesses. We have never brought in foreign FDI into our export sector. Some of the FDI has come into our import substitution, but clearly nothing has come into our export sector. So if we have to, and when these family businesses, they disintegrate because obviously with age they disintegrate, then we all know that the families only stick around for 2 generations. So there is fragmentation. So our industry is fragmented, and there is no value addition. And then what that means is it is dealt by the outside world as commodities, and very very low price for their commodities. So we have to just then work towards consolidation. We have to work towards value addition, and that will take some doing. Then we have a problem on our agriculture. Our agriculture, which has 60% of the population living, in the agriculture sector.
Correct, sir.
We clearly we don't produce much. Our productivity is very low. Our crops, 5 crops in the last 6-7 years, have not grown. Actually, they have declined. The production has declined, and the most pronounced decline is in cotton. So all these things, that means the rural economy is not growing, and not growing at all. Then you just have the social sector, and we're not spending enough money on education and health, and we're not producing the kind of we're not, and our population is around 65% is below the age of 25. So if we are not going to be giving them good education and not looking after their health, we are not going to be having a healthy, kind of nation. Then you just take a look at, what are we doing? Hello?
I mean, this is very important.
Are we still on? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then if you to look at, the other major issue, which is the CPAC. We basically now brought in, 45 to 60 billion dollars of infrastructure, and we are not using that. And as a matter of fact, now the capacity we have over capacity in power sector, and we are making payments when we actually not using that capacity. So all these are major issues today, and we have to be focused. And financial sector by itself and needs focus also. So I have now identified almost 7 to 8 areas which really need focus. And if we have focus, now these things which are the COVID things, they are transitory. They will just come and go away. But if we focus on these things, and this also includes the power sector and energy sector, I think we should start attaining around 4 to 5% in the next couple of years, going up to maybe 6.5%. But a lot will depend on raising the revenues closer to 20% of GDP, and our saving and investment rates closer to 30%.
All right, sir. One quick comment, sir, on another issue, since we talked about value addition, sir. Looking at the agro-based economy which we have, sir, the agriculture sector is on a constant shrinking mode, sir. From 27-28%, it has come down to 20-21%. So no value addition, no storage facilities, and on top, sir, transportation of product A to, for example, there is a produce at product at A juncture, and then you need to take it to B. Sir, 50% is wasted because of the lack of infrastructure. Nothing is happening on that, sir. Number 2, sir, still we are importing certain products like dairy products, like so many other edible items, even edible oil, sir, which we can manage here inside Pakistan. Nothing is happening on that front. Forget about the manufacturing, sir. Forget about the services sector. That's a separate chapter altogether. But sir, just focusing on the agricultural side, do you think we have a lot of strength, improve our productivity, increase per capita yield, and so on and so forth, sir? Your comment on that?
Yes, we used to be growing at a rate of around 5 to 6% in agriculture over a decade. in the 60s and maybe early 70s. And then subsequently, I think growth rates have dropped 1%, after every decade. And we are now almost at, kind of running at, maybe slightly over 0%. And all that is because that we have not invested, in water, seeds, in, kind of mechanization, in, the value addition, as you said, in terms of cold storages, in terms of, these large, kind of storages, which can give, which can also take care of the needs of the, common farmers. And frankly speaking, nothing has been done on all these areas. And as you said, that a lot of, produce is wasted because we cannot transport, not only transport within the country, but also we do not transport anything outside the country, whether fruits or vegetables, which are surplus. So all this needs a very comprehensive package. And I'm afraid since the 18th Amendment, this is now, and I think even before that, is a provincial subject, and there is no coordination.
That is the actual problem, sir. Tareen Saab, thank you so much, sir. We would like to, in fact, have you in our show whenever you are available in Islamabad. Thank you so much for your comments. Now, coming back to you, Suleri Saab, I think enough has been talked about. We had two very senior individuals, Shirani Saab and Tareen Saab, talking about the overall. Now, sir, one area which unfortunately holds the key, sir, that is about the fishing. That is about, it is related to your agriculture in one way or the other. But so your dairy capacity, sir, you talk about fruit and vegetable. I mean, we end up hearing that Pakistan is among the top 10 producers of wheat, top 10 in cotton, in rice, in the produce of dates, in the produce of mango, citrus fruit, so on and so forth. I mean, there's a long list. Yet, sir, the prices are hovering much above the capacity of the people to buy. And then when you talk about the purchasing power, that's constantly being eroded of the people, sir. Yet nothing is being done. I mean, where is this disconnect?
Well, I think one of the disconnects that you can see in year 2021, that is, of course, COVID, which has eroded purchasing capacities. But even if we look at our perishable commodities, one of the issues that the prices of perishable commodities, they are so volatile because we don't have storage facilities. So during the season, the producers, they actually have to, like in Badin a few months ago, the tomato growers, they had to plow their plants because the cost of picking of tomato was higher than its selling cost in the market. And now when Ramadan comes, we can see that tomato prices, they are already on rise. So because we don't have any storage facilities for perishable commodities, be they fresh vegetable or fresh fruits, so we are not able to stabilize their prices. In case of our staple food and cereals, unfortunately, lack of research and development on seed which can give yield during these changing climates and in the changing ecological zoning. So we don't have the wheat seed which can actually produce more yield. We don't have the cotton seeds which are resistant to the fungal attack or the pest attack. We don't have all other research and development in the seed varieties. Now, if you don't have research and development in seed varieties, the yield, it would keep on declining. The third and another important factor is, if you look at individual farmers, the progressive farmer in the same village would be getting 50 man per acre wheat yield. An average farmer would be getting 30 man per acre, and below average farmer who doesn't have the liquidity and capital to buy input in time, his or her yield may be less than 20 man per acre. So even if we can bridge that gap, the yield gap within same district, within same village, perhaps our productivity, it can increase manifold. But unfortunately, agriculture still is not able to get the proper attention. Those who are involved in agriculture, they are not doing it as a business or as an industry or on the basis of any cost benefit analysis. They are doing it because it's a stigma and taboo in our rural areas. that if you have some acreage, if you are involved in agriculture and you are buying wheat flour, the bag wheat flour, or if you're buying your rice from market, it is considered as a big taboo. Similar stories for livestock. In dairy and livestock, we are still not able to overcome this foot and mouth disease. So if we are not able to overcome foot and mouth disease, we are no more competitive in exporting our meat beyond certain markets, because they have this FMD, this certification requirement, which unfortunately Pakistan can't fulfill right now. The
Why
same
not?
story is
Why
for
not?
the
Look at
fisheries.
India, sir. They're the largest exporter of beef, though they call it the Gaon Mata. But the point is that's a, and even
They are
now,
able- they are
not
able to
only
have-
halal meat, otherwise also.
They are able to have those quarantine areas where they have overcome FMD, foot and mouth disease. Our major challenge that hampers our export is foot and mouth disease in cattle, for which we are not able to so far ring fence any area which we can declare free from FMD. Although Pakistan has been working with China on it for last many years, but nothing has been materialized so far. Similarly, in case of fisheries, it's again a sanitary and phytosanitary requirement. We know that our fishery export was banned in EU because of hygiene practices
Storage
and because
facilities. Sirs, they were so dirty. I happened to visit Karachi, and sir, you could not stand there. It was so smelly, honestly speaking. And you know, the kind of potential we have only through the export of seafood, that is around $2 to $3 billion, sir.
yeah,
Isn't it?
so I think we are not ready yet to embark upon all the opportunities that agriculture sector holistically, the crops, the livestock, and the fisheries that offers us. And if we are not ready to do it, we'll keep on importing our major food commodities. And with this imported food, it would be extremely difficult to control this inflation, which is happening due to increase of these prices in international market, and which is happening due to appreciation of dollar versus rupee that hampers our import prices, and then in fact in turn hampers our domestic prices. So it's all then cost push inflation, which State Bank unfortunately cannot control by raising interest rate. We have to reduce the cost of production if we really want to reduce that sort of inflation.
All right. Now, coming back to you, Sardar Sahab, one important area, unfortunately, that's so neglected, and that is the backbone of any economy in the world, sir. I mean, I read about India, I read about so many other countries, including Germany or France or Holland for that matter, even countries like Japan. And so that is about the small and medium enterprises, SMEs. So much of potential. Sir, look at Pakistan, the kind of grip and the kind of export potential we had. We are still stuck there, and eventually, sir, we have also lost a lot of market share. And Sardar Sahab, you know exactly what losing market share is all about, sir. You need to put in at least 10 times more money and effort to bring that lost customer back. Let's talk about it.
Let me give you an example on some facts. Now, when you look at the backbone, like you rightly said, is small, medium enterprise. But let's look at something in totality, comparison with the other developing nations. So when we're looking at India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, their per capita GDP about 20 years ago was the lowest, and Pakistan's was the highest. If you look at it now, 20 years down the line, Pakistan's is the lowest as compared to all the other developing nations.
Correct, sir.
If you look at the World Bank's analysis on regional trade, they foresee that Pakistan's regional trade can go up to $67 billion. If you look at our potential of trade with India, we have the potential to touch $35 billion. If you look at China and Taiwan, and the reason I want you to reflect on that is if you look at their issues, political issues they've had in the past, in 1999, China had trade between Taiwan about $35 billion. Currently, as of 2018-19, they're trading about $180 billion worth of bilateral trade between the two countries, despite their political differences. So Pakistan needs to firstly put aside everything that we have in terms of our political agendas with the other countries and focus primarily on exports and bilateral trade. That's first and foremost. With regards to your point to Larissa about why aren't we able to focus on all these sectors with dairy, agriculture, we're not having any value addition brought in. We're neglecting our own core areas in terms of dairy, in terms of our sectors which can really grow in terms of furniture. There's no transfer of technology, and that's exactly what's required where your local farmers are. If you look at the world market, if you have any Tesco's, Walmart, Asda, if you go there, if you look at all their organic products, they're far more expensive and they're tasteless. If you look at any Pakistani product, on the other hand, the citrus that we have, the mangoes, the dates, the apples, and if you put these products on the shelves, I promise you, we can charge twice as much premium, but we need the marketing. We need to be promoting these products. We need to have made in Pakistan written across all the best markets worldwide, and we need to do roadshows for that. We need to take BOI on board. We need to take the chambers on board and make sure that the world sees what Pakistani market has to offer. With regards to SMEs, look, we're neglecting this sector by not offering them any financing whatsoever. Currently, even a well-established corporate business would be paying about 10 to 11% interest rate if you bring Khyber into it as well. Despite the 7% that they're saying during COVID-19, it's not really 7%. If you add Khyber, it goes all the way up to about 10%, which is not viable. So any small, medium enterprise, before even considering to start up, they'll probably be dying down right away because who's going to finance them? Who's going to fund them? So I think that's the first problem. And that's where organizations such as ours have come in and said, we're going to have incubation center set up, and we're going to facilitate and finance new emergence, new ideas, new innovators, new entrepreneurs that have come into. We're looking forward to doing JVs, but it's not our job. Despite that, we're looking to add value to the market because we know what the core areas are where this country is going to be growing. So again, the setback is, the dilemma is, if I, as a developer, go out to the market and ask somebody to produce 1,000 doors for me, despite the capability, despite the human resource, they will not be able to do it because they don't have the machinery. I'll then have no choice but to turn to Malaysia, turn to Turkey, turn to China, and import them from there. So whose loss is that? It's Pakistan's loss. So, and I'll give you an example. We talked about this last time as well. IT, we've got 2,000 companies registered with Pasha, and half of these companies have accounts set up overseas simply because State Bank's process and procedures so far complicated that they don't want to deal with it. They would much rather receive funds overseas as opposed to bringing those remittances back into Pakistan. These are the realities. So it's all about policy at the end of the day. We sort out our policy, reforms, tax reforms, structural reforms, bring them in. This country is going to prosper like any other. So, for the last 20 years, there's been 200% market share growth from China, India, Bangladesh, and in the same 20 years, Pakistan with the rest of the world gained 200%. We would have been well over 50 billion.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, Sardar Saab, for your comments. Pleasure to have you as well, sir. Sulai Saab. So that's all we have for this, sir. I'll see you, inshallah, again. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.